And here's this guy that looks identical to me. And so we pull up the yearbook, and I mean, Lily, he looks exactly like me in high school. I knew I was looking at my real dad for the first time.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for not parent expected or non-paternal event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 94. I am pretty excited because today I'm going to a local NPE meetup here in just a couple of hours. A small group of about 10 of us have decided to meet at a local restaurant downtown Minneapolis today, and it's really beautiful out here where I live. So I think we are going to sit out on a patio on the Mississippi River, and I'm pretty pumped. And I'm actually a little nervous too. So I know a few of them, as they have been guests on the podcast, but about 5 of them I have never met. So I'm going to be nodding my head like crazy today, I am sure. I'm pretty grateful. I live in a time period where technology allows me to connect with people going through the same thing as me. I love listening to NPEs tell their stories. And we are going to listen to Chris today tell his. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Lily.
And I don't think it's even been a full year for you since you got your DNA test results. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I got my test results back in December of 2020. So just coming up on 9 months, 10 months.
So yeah, exactly. Depending on when you're listening to this, December 2020, and it is what, September 2021?
Yes.
You're an NPE baby still.
I know, but so much has happened. It's really been a wild year.
Yes, you sent me some pictures, so there must be some new developments in your story. First, why don't you go ahead and share a bit about your family of origin, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. So I was born in November 1984 in Sacramento, California. And just kind of growing up, I always knew my birth story was that my mom was working in Cupertino, and she was a hairstylist in a mall. And they kind of, her and my birth certificate father just kind of had friends with benefits, that kind of situation. And so she would come home from Cupertino to Sacramento, and she was really good friends with his sister and him, and they would kind of hang out and party and stuff. And one of those times she got pregnant, and so she thought that she was just going to have me and not, try to find the dad. And she had a job opportunity to go to New York City, and so she was just going to take me to New York and just live with me and raise me there. But she came back to Sacramento one weekend, and she was starting to show. And so my birth certificate father, his sister, who they were friends, kind of, she was like, "Hey, are you pregnant?" And my mom was just, kind of a nervous wreck. And finally she said, "Yes, I think so." And she said, "Is it my brother's?" And my mom kind of said, "I'm not sure, but I think so." Mm. So she went to Kaiser. I guess I don't know if that's a big hospital everywhere, but so she went to Kaiser and had and they checked her out and said, "Yes, you're pregnant." And they said, "Yep, it's most likely David's." And so that was it. She quit her job in the Bay Area and moved back to Sacramento. and they bought a house together. And uh, then they got pregnant again with my brother, and so they decided it's time to get married. And and then after getting married, a couple years later, my sister came along, and so we grew up kind of a pretty typical middle class suburban family in Sacramento. We had dogs. We went camping every summer. We did a lot of boating on the river and at lakes and stuff. We all played little league sports, and from the outside, it just looked like a pretty typical family. Um, but growing up, I kind of knew I never looked like anyone in my family. And as I got a little older, I kind of realized this, and my parents would comment on it too, like, "Oh wow, you don't look like anyone on your dad's side of the family." And I don't know when, but they had dug up some picture of a great grandfather on my mom's side, and so, oh yeah, that's the guy you look like. And I never even saw this picture. they
Mm.
they never showed it to me, so I didn't really know what was going on there. But uh, my brother looks identical to my dad, to my birth certificate father, and
Mm.
my dad would um, have pictures all over the house of him as a baby. And it was kind of funny when my brother was younger. He was, oh, that's my picture, and oh no, that's me. That's dad. And my brother would get confused, and so they always treated my brother just as the favorite. He was number one in the family, and he's 2 years younger. But he was also born with a heart defect, and so um, barely survived being born. And so they just loved him, and he looked like my dad, so my dad just loved him. Um, and actually, both of my brother and sister, just that side of the family, just they all have a really strong facial features. They all kind of look like each other, and so my brother and sister just really look that way. Um, and I just look like I don't know who. So and so me and my birth certificate father, just we as we got older, we just did not get along. And I didn't know why. He wanted me to play baseball and football and stuff, and I did not like sports. I was not into it. I got way more into computers, which they were just starting to become a real thing growing up in the late '90s. And
Mhm.
so I was just like super into photography and digital art and 3D design and video editing and stuff. And he just wanted nothing to do with it. He thought I was some kind of drug addict playing with computers, and which makes no sense because I was always home and I've never done a drug in my life. And I was a pretty straight and narrow kid, and um, but my grades kind of suffered. Just he put a lot of pressure on me to have perfect grades, and I don't know. I hated school, and I could only get C's, and he would just get so mad. And I would just dread coming home with a C on my report card. Just like, how do I get out of this? How can I just run away and find a new family? But he also really struggled with alcohol. He would just drink so much, and uh, he'd come home from work and just drink a 12 pack of beer, and by the afternoon, he would just be mad at everyone over the tiniest things. uh, you know, Maybe at dinner time it was you have your elbows on the table, and now you're just such a terrible person. You never listen, you don't pay attention. And it was actually kind of funny at the dinner table. I would sit in the chair that was furthest away from him, and it was right next to my mom, and that's just how we didn't get along. And he would get in these shouting matches with me. He'd come up to my bedroom and just be like inches from my face, yelling at me with beer breath and just spitting all over me about I don't even know what. Because I know one of them, I had the window open, and I don't know what you think you're doing. I've got the air conditioning on. Blah, blah, blah. Are you trying to get the smell of weed out of your room? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And pretty typically it would just end in me just absolutely bawling, crying myself to sleep, and just hating my life. And I very distinctly remember thinking, I think there's someone else out there. I don't look like this guy, and I don't know why he hates me, but I just felt like there was like I had a different dad and that there was someone else out there. And if I could ever find him, he probably looked exactly like me. And, it was kind of funny because later on when we did our ancestry test, my wife was like, "Why do you already have an ancestry account?" And you know, I kind of got onto ancestry as soon as, I don't know, whenever it was available, and I guess I didn't understand genealogy, but I thought, maybe I could get on there and put my name in and find something that that
Mm-hmm.
was that would tell me I had a different dad, or I guess not knowing how any of that kind of stuff works. Yeah, I gave up pretty quick because that's not how that works. um, but I had to I had to tell my wife, well, that's why I have an account, because you know I I I just always suspected this. And so as time kind of went on, it just got more and more obvious to a lot of people. We would have, my friends would meet my parents for the first time, and later on they would say, are you sure that's your dad? Are you like adopted, or is he your stepdad? Or and I would say, yeah, about that. I'm pretty sure he's not, but I have no other, and um, talking to my mom about it was just something that never even crossed my mind. It was, how do you even have that conversation? Um, I guess it's, in a way, it would be kind of like demoralizing to her if you, said, hey, did you, sleep with someone else that might be my dad? And
Mm-hmm.
it's just a very uncomfortable thing. And um, I don't know, most of the time I didn't think about it. I didn't even, just didn't cross my mind. It was only when we had like really bad interactions, or fights or whatever. But so it just goes on and on. Like uh, one time, my aunt on that side of the family, she lives in Florida, so she came out to visit, and it was my brother's birthday, and I think he had just turned 21, so we decided to go to the bar and hang out with her, and she's all excited, like, oh, this is gonna be fun hanging out with my nephews at the bar and stuff. And we did have a fun time, but I got there and I forgot my ID. And well, even though he just turned 21, he had been in the bar all the time because it's kind of out in the country outside of Sacramento there. And she's like, well, yeah, I need your ID. You look young. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot it. And my brother goes, no, no, that's my brother. He's. And she's like, well, William, you're in here all the time, but that's not your brother. He does not look like you. You're trying to cover up for one of your younger friends. And and then my sister's like, no, no, that's my brother. And she's just not having it. Like, no, you guys don't look anything alike. There's no way you guys are siblings.
Mm-hmm.
uh Even my aunt looks a lot like my sister, and just don't look like me. And uh so anyway, that was just kind of, one of those funny stories looking back on times that it was just so obvious it was right there.
Yep.
So as time went on, my parents just never. It was a bad marriage from the start. My dad's just, a drunk, and he gets really aggressive and angry, and we get mad at my mom, and um, they would just have crazy fights. And I remember one time, after he was just yelling at her and throwing things, and I said, Mom, why don't we just leave? We should just get away from this guy and go somewhere else. And she's, no, 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 he's fine. He's just mad. I burned dinner and I deserved it. And gosh, at holidays, it would be so terrible because we'd have family over for Thanksgiving, and my mom would, not set a timer for something, and it would start burning in the oven, and he would just come undone yelling at her. And the whole family's just looking at each other like, are we really here? Are we really doing this right now? And so eventually, they did go through divorce, and it took 7 years, and it's only just now getting finalized. And it was
Wow.
just really bad. They were fighting over the house, and over money, and over rental properties they had, and over his inheritance and stuff. And my wife actually is a realtor, and she stepped in and tried to help and said, I'll sell it for you guys. And I kind of told her, I was like, don't get involved in this. This is so bad. And sure enough, he lost it on her, and he's yelling at my wife, and I've told him several times before, just get out of my life. I don't need you in it. I don't want anything to do with you. And this was one of those times, and so we just stopped talking, and that's kind of a common thread where we just wouldn't talk. I'd just go a year without talking to him, but eventually, I don't know. For some reason, I always end up starting to talk to him again. And
Mm-hmm.
now that we have kids, he has, he considers them his grandchildren. And so it's like, well, he should be able to see his grandchildren and whatnot. And so it's just really off and on like that. And just, uh. So, after all the divorce kind of settles out, my wife and I had been looking at moving out of California, just because I was doing a long commute down to the Bay Area, and traffic there is crazy, and it's just everything's crazy in California. And so we were kind of thinking Arizona or Idaho, and Deborah's mom lived in, that's my wife, Deborah, lived in Arizona, and we had visited a couple times, and we thought, oh, well, let's go visit Idaho. And so we go up to Idaho, and just kind of assuming we'd move to Boise, and I had never actually even really known where Coeur d'Alene was. It's kind of a smaller resort town in North Idaho, and so we're okay. Well, let's go visit that also. And so we drive up there, and just never having been there, met with a realtor, and I got a job offer, and we decided that's it. That's where we're going to move. We're moving to Coeur d'Alene, and it was just really weird because I don't do things that way. I don't do them that. I'm not that. I don't know, spontaneous. And so it was like this is like the biggest change of our life, and I just did it so spontaneously. So one thing that kind of I don't know if it plays into this, but my grandpa had passed away in 2017, and this is my mom's side, and me and him were just so close. He just loved me to death, and he always hated my birth certificate father. And I mean, we would do everything together. He hired me at his engineering firm to go out and do construction work with him and stuff. He taught me how to drive a forklift and a bobcat, and he was super into airplanes, and so he would take me to like every air show that we could get to. We would go to Las Vegas for the 50th anniversary Air Force Air Show, and we went to Reno air races all the time. And just anytime he could put me in the left seat of a Cessna and take a picture of me, he would do it. And so he always wanted me to become a pilot. And my birth certificate father was just so down on my grades and stuff. He's, oh, you're never going to be a pilot. So, anyways, Grandpa had passed away in 2017, and shortly after that, I went ahead and got my pilot's license, and then we made this move, and I don't know, for some reason, looking back now, I kind of feel like he was somehow guiding me in my life to where I needed to be. And it's so after we move up here to Idaho, this is kind of the event that triggered everything. My dad had kind of self-invited him. He invited himself up here to go hunting. That was one of the things he always wanted to do, was out of state hunt in Idaho in the Rocky Mountains. And so I said, okay, fine. I kind of became friends with my neighbor, and he has some property up in the mountains, and so he comes up here and just hijacks my hunting season. And he had another friend who moved up here, and he says, no, 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 we're gonna go hunting with this guy. And I said, no, 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 I got this in with my friend, and I have a camper trailer, and I got property, or we have this property to go to. And he's, yeah, well, we could do that after. Let's go with this guy, because he says that there's deer everywhere. We'll be able to get a deer. And just me being a pushover and not wanting to argue with him, I say, yeah, okay, fine, whatever, let's do that. And it turned out just really bad. this guy's uh, has never hunted before, and he actually wanted to hunt on a private campground that was closed for the season, and oh, it was just terrible because that's you know that's just not how we hunt. We go out in the woods and we put in the effort and we try to find an animal. Uh, and anyway, without getting into too many graphic details, it just got really bad. And finally, he agrees. Okay, let's go. And see your friend's property. And so all my friends are in camp, and we show up. And I say, hey, this is my dad. I didn't know any better. David. And and they kind of look at him, and they kind of look at me, and they're like, huh. And so David says, yeah, I know we don't look anything alike. And when he was born, I told his mother, are you sure he's mine? And I had actually heard him make this comment before, but this time it was like, you're upsetting me while you're staying up here. You kind of hijacked my hunting season, and now we're going to do this again. And so I had to I had to come home for the weekend because of work. And I tell my wife, I'm like, this is just the most miserable hunting trip ever. And she says, it's always the most miserable hunting trip when you go with David. And I said, yeah, you're right. And she said, your aunt did one of those DNA tests. We could do that and see, if he really is your dad. And I don't know how, I never really looked into all this stuff. Like I knew you could do DNA tests and I knew you could find out where you're from. And so, my mom's side and David's side are both largely German background. So I said, yeah, I guess we could do a DNA test and we would find out how German I am. And I guess if it turns out I'm not very German, that would be the answer. And, you know, I guess I guess when she said that your aunt did it, somehow in my mind, I said, oh, yeah, I guess they would just match you up with other people in your family, even though I didn't know that to be a fact. So while he's here, we order. She goes, well, there's so many companies that do it, and I said, you know what? Let's just order them all. We're doing. Let's do 23andMe and Ancestry. And come to find out, there's some other ones, but I guess those were the two big ones that would probably give us the best chance of finding out something. So those show up while he's here, and my wife has to go hide the DNA test, and we wait until he leaves. And I kind of hesitated for. I guess everybody does this now, but I kind of hesitated for a week or so, and I sometimes I get these really strong feelings about something that's going to happen. I had a feeling one time that something wasn't right about my wife borrowing my truck for to go to work for the day. And sure enough, it started raining and she got in an accident. And then another time we were supposed to go on a trip to Lake Tahoe, and I just had this really bad feeling about the trip. And I was just thinking I don't know, for some reason we should cancel this. And sure enough, we got in a car accident in the snow. And so I always get these really weird feelings. And I'm taking the DNA test, and you spit in the tube, and right as I'm putting it back in the envelope to seal it up, I just have this feeling something just really strongly comes over me and says, "This is going to change your life forever." And and gosh, it sure did. But so we seal it up, send them off, and I told my wife, I said, I just have this really weird feeling somehow my life's going to change forever. She's freaking out because she had a surgery planned the next week, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it through surgery. and and that's going to be your life-changing event. And I don't think that's it. I don't think so. And so she has her surgery and everything was fine. And so the first one that comes back is 23andMe because they're super fast. It's so awesome that they're so fast. I got home from work and we opened up the computer, and we open up the 23andMe results and we get logged in and everything. And so the first thing we did was we went to ethnicity, because it was oh my gosh, how German am I really, And it shows 20% German. And I'm like, gosh, unless someone's got their backgrounds wrong, that's pretty low. And I'm scrolling through, and there's there's British background, and there's a little tiny bit of African, and so okay, fine, there's not very much German. Look at these matches. Let's see these matches. So right away, a couple cousins come up, and I recognize them from my mom's side, and I'm recognizing names. There's names in there where it's like, oh yeah, okay, I know these people. And then we start coming across names because 23andMe kind of like they do a lot better job of sorting and of like naming people. They just, this is your grandparent, this is your cousin, this is your, brother, sister, whatever. So on my paternal side, though, it's just no one I recognize. And for David's side of the family, it is a really small family. Uh, you know, there's just none of his brothers and sisters had kids, and um, even going above that, his parents were single children and stuff. So it's kind of a small family, anyways. But I was wondering, well, which company did my aunt test with? Because I know that she had found some distant relatives on that side of the family from a DNA test and doing a bunch of uh, genealogy and stuff. So we're just looking at these names though, and not recognizing any of them. And then we went to the little map where it shows like your family tree, and we started realizing like some of these names that it's coming up with are really far out there, anyways. And we do, the first thing everybody does is go to Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and start typing in names, and you know, and then so then I start getting this feeling like which name could be my last name. All of a sudden, like it dawns on me, if this is real, then I don't have the right last name. And so I'm looking at these names thinking, wow, which one of these is supposed to be my last name? And, anyways, just because of the distance on those, we really didn't get much further with it. So we kind of just, were just like, okay, well, we're not as German. I'm not as German as I thought. And I had actually been talking to my sister about this the whole time, and she's super supportive, and I don't really know what she was feeling about it, but she's just like, oh no, I don't recognize any of those names either. And because she's a lot more in touch with a lot more of the family, because my mom's side of the family is just huge. I've got something like, I don't know, I think it comes up to like over 100 cousins and second cousins. And so it's just massive. And so
Mm.
I'm like, Holly, who do you recognize any of these names? Because you know a lot more of those cousins. She's like, no, I've never heard any of those names. And so that was kind of it. That was where we left it. So a few more weeks go by, and the ancestry results come in while I'm at work. And my wife texts me, and she says, "Hey, your ancestry results come in." And I said, "Yeah, I saw the notification. Don't open it though. Let's do it together tonight." And she said, well, I saw there's a close match. It says close family, and I don't recognize the name. And I said, okay, stop. don't go solving this without me. So so we get home that evening and we pull it up together, and sure enough, there's a close match, or a close family is what Ancestry calls it. And I didn't really understand centimorgans, but she shows up as 1400 centimorgans. But the name is just like a username, and it looks like a first and middle name bumped together. So we try to go on to Facebook and we try to find her, and no one by any of that kind of name comes up. So then we were like, okay, shoot, and I'm Googling her name and stuff, and this just does not come up at all. So we kind of move down the list and start Facebook stalking the next person and then the next person. And eventually we get to a pretty far out cousin. I think he's like third cousin or something. I don't remember what the centimorgans are, but it was lower. It was 100 something centimorgans. And my wife Googles him, and she starts seeing some of the other names on the DNA list. And so she's like, okay, we got the right family.
Mm.
And I actually don't know how she did it, but she was going into that person's friends list, and she started just browsing everybody's Facebook that she could. And so she's scrolling through one of the people, and all of a sudden, and I mean, she's doing like deep dig on this stuff, but to her credit, I think it only took her like 2 hours to find this person. So she's scrolling through and she finds a picture, and she's clicking on all the pictures and reading all the comments. And down at the bottom of the comment, from someone, it says, "Oh, that was that Disneyland trip. Um, I remember you, so and so." And she goes, "Oh my gosh, that's that girl's name."
Mm.
And I go, "Well, that's a really young girl. That's why she wouldn't come up on Facebook." And so, we're kind of debating like, wow, how young is this girl? But I match her 1400 cm. So, and again, my wife found this in 2 hours of looking at this. And so, this whole thing just becomes a really quick whirlwind. And I really didn't even have time to process what was happening. So we're looking on the ancestry thing, and it gives you how could this person possibly be related to you? This could be your, I think this could be your grandma, this could be your half aunt, this could be your cousin, this could be your half sister, that kind of thing. So we're looking at this and we're thinking, okay, if this girl's like 18, 17, something like that, she can't be my grandma. She can't be, she's probably not an aunt. This looks like a half sister. And, when I set out on this, all I wanted to do was prove whether or not David was my dad. And I thought I was going to do it through ethnicity. And for some reason, it never even dawned on me that there would be a whole nother family that came along with a different dad. And all of a sudden we're sitting here thinking, I have another sister. This is weird. So my wife finds the person that made the comment and goes on her Facebook thing, and ends up kind of finding like a picture of her dad, and she shows it to me, and the whole world just stops spinning. And I go, I've imagined this person for so long. That's him. I can't even believe it. Like he just looks identical to me. So we look him up on, I think is it Classmates that does the yearbooks?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we look it up, and okay. So the other thing was in his description, it said high school, Cupertino High School. And I thought, oh my gosh, my mom was working in Cupertino, like very specifically, not the Bay Area, not San Jose, in Cupertino. that's been my story growing up. And here's this guy that looks identical to me, and he went to high school in Cupertino. And so we pull up the yearbook, and I mean, Lily, he looks exactly like me in high school. I knew I was looking at my real dad for the first time. So my wife messages this other girl, and you know, I told her, I said, you got to be really careful because this could upset an entire family. Um, and so she messages and says, "Hey, this sounds really weird, but we think we found a DNA match to this girl in the picture because you use the same name, and we've also matched this other last name." And at the same time, I started putting together a direct message through Ancestry to this girl, like saying, "Hey, we're a really close match. How are we related?" And for some reason, I just instinctually knew that could be a long shot of getting or of hearing back from her on that, because the last account login was like 2 years ago. Um, and and so we kind of, it's getting late on I think it was a Friday night. It's getting late, and we kind of say, okay, well, I don't think we're going to go much further than this. And but I have this picture of the yearbook. I'm looking at it on my phone as we're going to bed. I'm just staring at it, and I told my wife, I said, I swear I'm staring at my dad for the first time in my life. And she says, well, we just got to see what comes back. And so shoot, I think it was like midnight that night. All of a sudden we get a message back um, from the girl that she had messaged. And she says, yeah, that's my sister. I told her to check her ancestry messages. And so apparently that younger girl works nights, kind of a night shift deal. And so she was asleep. And so now she's up and she PMs me back and says, yeah, we do match really close. That's weird. I never thought I'd find family on Ancestry. I just wanted to see what my ethnical background was. And so we kind of, the next day, message, we kind of message each other back on Facebook, but my wife's doing it. She's doing the messaging. And we kind of come to the conclusion that uh, we're all siblings. We're all half siblings, because the girl that had commented on the picture, they were sisters, and so we kind of figure out that this is my half sister, and this is another half sister. So we start browsing her Facebook account, and it turns out I've got 5 other half sisters. Yeah. Uh, so we kind of start sending them pictures of me, and they go, "Oh yeah, you're definitely a member of the family. You've got Lebanese eyes." And I thought, well, that's what? What? That's weird. And so I go back to the ethnical background, and where it said Africa, I feel kind of dumb about this, but for some reason I was like, of course, everyone's going to have a little bit of African in their DNA. That's where we came from.
Mhm.
And no, so I click on it and drill it down, and sure enough, there it is, Lebanon, your Lebanese background. And I go, oh my gosh, what? That's so weird. And it was actually pretty high. I think it was 10 something percent.
Mm.
And so they're like, oh yeah, no, our family's got a big Lebanese background, and so they said, okay, so what does this mean? Does this mean that our dad is your dad? And so we're trying to figure this out. And they said, well, that could be, but we have an uncle also, and so it could be him. It might be him. And I we said, no, we're looking at the picture of your dad, and it's definitely him. And so they sent us along a picture of their uncle, and we're like, there's no way. He doesn't look nearly as identical as me. So by Sunday, um, they message us and they say our dad is freaking out right now. and um and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sure he is. And they said, here's his phone number, he wants you to contact him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I even say? What do I do? So they said, just a text message is fine. And so I said, okay. I sent him a text message, and it's like, you know, hey, it looks like I match your daughter, really close on Ancestry. And we think that she's a sister. And so he just kind of says, like, oh, okay, I never thought this could happen. I have 5 daughters, and I never thought I would have a son. And are you healthy? What do you do? And I said, yeah, I'm really healthy. And that's actually kind of an anomaly, because my brother and sister both have major medical problems. And and I'm a very successful auto mechanic, and I live here in Coeur d'Alene. And he says, wow, or that's really weird, because my daughters live in Spokane. And so, for anybody not familiar with the Pacific Northwest, Spokane is like right next door to Coeur d'Alene. From my house, it's an hour to Spokane.
Hmm.
And if you were in Coeur d'Alene, it would be 20 minutes. It's just right over the border.
Hmm.
And so they kind of, so he was talking to them a lot in the background. And so he's just kind of in disbelief and doesn't really know what to make of this. And they they kind of all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, you live right there in North Idaho. We live in Spokane. This is so crazy. And so come to find out that he had divorced their mom and remarried and had another daughter with them. So that'd be my 5th sister, and she's only 11. And so now here I am, 36 years old, and I have an 11-year-old sister. Like, this is just wild. um, so over December, we just kind of start, the sisters like immediately just accepted as fact. Yep, this is cool. We got a brother now. You look exactly like dad, and he's not as convinced. Uh, and it's like really difficult. It's like how much do you push the subject, or you're walking such a fine line. And um, so I kind of wouldn't hear from him, and I thought, okay, what if I send him a picture of me, just and see what he thinks. And um, one of my new sisters had actually sent me a picture of him in his 20s, 30s. And so my wife did a side by side, kind of bumped together picture, and I sent that to him. And he says, okay, I need to do a DNA test myself. Which one did you do? And I said, Ancestry was the one that matched me to your daughter. So he says, okay, I'm doing that. And so I'm like, okay, cool. In 3 to 4 weeks, I'll have an answer. And so three weeks go by, and I'm just checking Ancestry DNA, every hour of every day. And in this time, I got really into the genealogy thing, and I'm looking at. So my new sister had a massive family tree for that side of the family. And I mean, I'm looking at my biological grandparents for the first time, and I've got an uncle, and I've got an aunt, and I've got cousins out there, and so I just got obsessed. And December had to have been the longest month of my life, only second to January, February, and I think March is when his DNA test finally came back. And it was so weird because I had been waiting, and he had told me in January, okay, I finally sent the DNA test in. And so, I'm checking it every week and every day. And for some reason we were getting ready for bed, and I had this feeling like, I should just check it before I go to bed. And sure enough, before Ancestry could even send me the alert, his result had come in. And it's such an overwhelming feeling all of a sudden seeing this guy, and it comes up parent, 50% DNA match. And it's like, that was like it was like the whole thing happened again. Here I have to accept this all over again. And I just, Lily, I did so much crying in these 3 months. And, for the most part, I kind of got that all out of my system. But so that comes back, but I fell apart again that night. And so that comes back. And in this time, David had really kind of been being a pain in my butt. And he was needing paperwork for the divorce and stuff, and needed my social security number and just a bunch of weird stuff. And so a couple days later, he sends me a text message, something about, his grandchildren or something. And I'm working on this truck, trying to do a tune up on it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like crying, trying to fix a truck. I just start bawling, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the most embarrassing thing. And I text him back and I said, hey, I need to talk to you. And he says, I don't like that, tone or that wording. Is there something wrong? And I said, no, everyone's okay, but I really need to talk to you. And I had been just dreading telling him, but it was like, I need to tell him. And I had already told my mom. So we kind of, I kind of got out of order there. I'm sorry. There's just so much happened. So when I told my mom, I asked my sister, because my sister was the first one I had told. And this is Holly, the one I grew up with. And I said, hey, it's coming back. I'm matching a whole different family. It looks like this guy's my dad. And she says, oh my gosh, you just can't tell mom right now. She's so emotional. Her life's so messed up with this divorce. And I said, Holly, my life is completely sideways right now. There's not much sympathy going on right now that way. And so she says, okay, all right. Yeah, I guess you're right. Well, they still live in Sacramento, so we have to do this over a video call. So I video call her, and she says, hey, what's going on? and I said, Mom, I've always thought that, David wasn't my dad, because he doesn't look like me. And she says, Oh, no, no, you remember we talked about that picture of your great grandfather. That's who you look like. Of course, he's your dad. And I said, Mom, I have a DNA test that matches me to a whole other family through a half sister. And she's just looking at me and, well, I don't understand. And my sister starts bawling on the couch sitting next to her. And I said, Mom, David's not my dad. I have a different dad. And she said, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense. And so my wife chimes in and she says, did you ever know a Scott? And my mom just so weird. She goes, Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, he worked at a car dealership in the Bay Area and yeah, I dated him a little bit. And she goes, That's Chris's dad. And my mom, her jaw, I don't know if I've ever actually seen a person's jaw drop. Her jaw just drops and she's just staring at me and she says, Oh shit. and 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 she just starts bawling, just runs into the bathroom, and my sister's sitting there crying too, and now I'm crying, and so she comes back and I just never knew how this could happen. And so she actually flew out right away, and we had a long weekend of talking about, things that had happened. And she says, Oh my gosh, when I got pregnant, I just thought it had to have been David, and I never even considered Scott. And so anyway, Scott's results come back, and it was so funny because I'm crying that night, and uh, by midnight he text messages me and he says, It looks like you're my son. I need to fly out and see you. And I'm like, Oh my gosh, okay. And so he lives in Seattle. So it's kind of just weird how we all ended up here in the Pacific Northwest. But
Mm-hmm.
so we make plans, and he's going to fly out, and he's going to drive out, and he's going to stay with his daughters in Spokane, and he's going to come meet me Sunday afternoon. And so he's like, Okay, what's your address? I'm coming over. And so he shows up, and um, it was just the weirdest thing, just staring at someone that actually looks like me. And that's kind of why I sent you the pictures, because I thought it would just be interesting uh, for you to see that. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, he just looks exactly like me. And
He's totally your dad.
oh my gosh,
Completely.
a
In
hundred.
every way.
Yeah, it was what I always imagined. It was just what I always imagined. So we kind of had a fun afternoon, and um, you know, barbecued some chicken and drank wine and played dice games, um, and he left, went back to Seattle. And so then my new sisters are like, Oh, we have to meet. And so uh, we we get together, and it was really kind of awkward, and but they have their kids, and they brought all their kids, and we met up in a big park in Spokane. Um, and the one sister, she just comes running up to me, I gotta give you a hug right away. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, okay. And so then the kids were playing in the park and stuff, and they said, Oh, well, why don't you come back over to our house? And okay, let's do that. And so one of my new sisters, is sitting there, and she's just staring at me and staring at me. And finally, I just got to say it. You look so much more like Dad in real life. I mean, this is like freaky, but in a good way. And so it was just that was just great. I mean, they just accepted me right away. And so then my biological father, he starts planning out, okay, so for Memorial Day weekend, let's all get together. Let's go camp at your sister's house for the weekend. And so we all got together, and I brought my camper down there, and he had his tent in the backyard, and it was just like a giant family reunion. And so then he brought my little 11-year-old sister for the first time. And
Wow.
yeah, and so so my four new sisters, this is also the first time I've ever seen people that look like me, just in general, their facial features and just it's weird because it's like, oh my gosh, like this smile just looks familiar. I don't know how, but it does. And their laugh is just something about their laugh. And so anyway, the littlest sister, she doesn't look that much like me. She's blonde haired and stuff. And my other sisters are all dark hair, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I've ever seen dark haired people that are related to me. And so the little sister didn't really know what to do with me, and she's kind of, and by the second day, she kind of warmed up to me, and she's like, oh, I like soccer. You want to kick a soccer ball around? I'm like, heck yeah, let's do that. And so we're kind of playing around, and then she's like, I brought something for you. And she comes back with a framed picture of her, and I just start bawling. Yeah, it's just like the sweetest thing.
Mm.
And so then my biological father, he pulls out family albums, photo albums, and we sit at the picnic table out back, and I'm just absolutely just crying, gushing. I'm seeing my little sisters growing up, and him as a younger man, and grandparents, and people that have passed away since then, and it's just this year has been so emotionally draining. It's like, for every great experience, like the Memorial Day camp out and getting to hang out with these people, there's like a secondary, just emotional drain that comes with it. And every night that weekend, we'd go to bed in the camper, and I would just sit there and just cry myself to sleep. Just, you're just thinking about all the things you've missed, and and they're telling stories around the campfire of things they've done, and it's like, gosh, this is the family I was supposed to be a part of, and I missed out on all of this. And here they have all these wonderful experiences, and my new sister's brother, he's like, or I'm sorry, her husband, he's kind of been the brother to all these girls because they've been together for 15 years. And it's like, I'm supposed to be the brother.
Wow.
And there's just, but it's just weird. It's, you just have all these thoughts. And it's just really emotionally draining, as great as it is. So, so since then, I've met them all, and there was one sister that was a little bit of a holdout, but when she finally met me at the Memorial Day weekend, she was just like, oh yeah, you're my brother. And and so they wanted to get selfies with me and stuff, and that was really weird, because then I started looking at the selfies, and it was like, oh my gosh, we really do look alike. And it was really funny because so it was the youngest sister that I had matched on Ancestry. It turned out she was 19, and so she's having her 20th birthday, and just a quick get together at her mom's house. And I was like, are you sure that's okay? And she's like, oh yeah, no, mom wants to meet you. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And so we go over there, and her mom's just, staring at me, and she's like, oh my gosh, you really are Scott's kid. And their grandma was there, and their grandma, she goes, I tell everyone this story. This is just like the best story I've ever heard in my life. Oh, you look exactly like Scott. This is so great. And she's like, yeah, I told my hairdresser. I'm like, okay. And so then their mom kind of was looking at me and the older sister next to each other, and she goes, I always thought my daughter looked more like me, but now that I see you, you guys are like twins. It's just, I don't think she got any of my DNA. And so it was just, I realized it was going to affect everybody, but everybody just kind of seems to take it really well. And I think a lot of that was that they had already been divorced. And so, and he's already been remarried and had a kid. And so I think a lot of that feelings of, I don't know, mixed up family and stuff, I think a lot of that's already gone for them. And so it's a lot easier to accept me because they already have, siblings from another mother and stuff. And so it's just been such a whirlwind. And it was just, gosh, the spring, it felt like I lived 3 years going through those 3 months. And now that we've all met and we've been getting together more, I kind of feel like my life is finally getting back somewhat normal. But, I still have just these weird feelings. It's like I'll be at work just walking around and it's like, whose legs are even, am I even walking on right now?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even recognize myself anymore. And, looking in the mirror, it's like, I've never even seen myself that way. It's so weird because it's not so much that now, I don't know. It's not so much that I saw myself in him. It's that I see him in me. And that's the really weird thing. Like, I we went on a big, we actually went on a big summer vacation, out kind of towards you. We went out to Wisconsin
Mm.
and, we were, I was kind of making family videos and stuff. And, looking back at those videos, it's like, I'm watching myself, but I'm not seeing me. I'm seeing Scott.
Mm.
And it's like this weird just chill goes over my body. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've just never seen myself that way. And so it's like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Just, it's really, it's a lot to deal with as far as trying to figure that kind of stuff out.
Yeah, the identity, I don't want to necessarily call it a crisis because you're just kind of relearning. I just can't even imagine. Oh, I can. What your brain is going through, your feelings emotionally, the challenges with this new identity you have.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, we've been out to his house too in Seattle a couple times. And I mean, it's kind of funny because me and him kind of, react the same way to each other, where it's like we just kind of look at each other and we don't really know what to do with each other. And it's like,
Mm.
you know, um, he's funny though. He tells, his friends and stuff, oh, this is my son. And they're, well, I didn't know you had a son. Oh, it's a long story. I'll have to tell you sometime. And, but, I don't know. I kind of see some of the same behavior in him as me. And it's so weird. It's so weird because, yeah, there's just so much that goes along with it. But one of the trips out to Seattle, he had his brother over, and his brother came out with. So I got to meet. Gosh, I have three or four. I can't remember now. I think I have four cousins on that side, and so I got to meet all these cousins, and they're just they totally welcome me too. They're like, oh, hey, cousin, and they're giving me hugs and
Aw.
stuff, and I got to meet my uncle, and, then we went out to the great uncle's house, and he actually has a vineyard in on Vashon Island, and he's a pilot too, so he was just like all about talking to me. He's like, "Oh, this is
Oh.
so cool! That Scott has a son that's a pilot. We should go flying sometime." And, um, so it's just been a wild ride, but yeah, just gosh, sometimes I think about, my children, and, now they get to know their true family, and because that's their biological family too, and this affects them just as much as anything. And ever since I told David about, I'm not, hey, I did this DNA test and I'm not yours, and gosh, he got so mad at me. What did I ever do that made you have to go find a new dad? And it's like, what are you even
Wow.
talking about?
Mm.
That's not how this works.
Yeah.
um, that's not how DNA works. I don't get to just find. And so he hasn't talked to me since I told him earlier this year, and which is fine.
Mhm.
We've gone plenty of time not talking to each other, but,
Yep.
my daughter's birthday's coming up, and so he sent her a gift card and a card, and it's like, gosh, how do I deal with this? I still have
Mhm.
all this outstanding. How are we going to move forward with all of this? Because I want my children to know who their real grandpa is,
Mhm.
and who their real cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff are. And, and my wife she's actually kind of frustrated because of my last name isn't correct.
Yeah.
And she's like,
Oh yeah,
yeah, oh
we
gosh.
don't talk to a lot of male NPEs. I forget the
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's true.
I know women have it easy, I guess, because you just most women have their husband's last name anyways.
Mhm.
And so my wife is upset. I don't want David's last name. This is terrible.
Mm.
She was fine. She was fine with my last name, and it's funny because when we got married, I just kind of said, we don't have to worry about David. We can make our own, family with that last name, and whether or not it's truly, my lineage, we're just starting over, and that last name just starts over from here. And
Mhm.
so now she's like, no, she's like, I want Scott's last name. he's
Wow.
he's way nicer to me than David, and
Wow.
she's thinking of the kids. She's
Yep.
like, I want them to have the right last name. I don't want them to have this weird last name. And
Wow.
I guess they're young enough that we could change it because they're only 6 and 7, and it's like, yeah, we could probably change it now, and they may never know the difference.
Mhm.
We've kind of talked about that too. Like now they know their real aunts and cousins and stuff, and my sister's like, oh, it'll be fine because they're young enough now. They're just going to grow up always having known this family, and my kids are always going to grow up just knowing Uncle Chris, and so but gosh, just so much that goes along with this. So my wife wants me to change my last name, but it's a lot of work.
So much work. I'm actually talking with someone on the side right now, also a male NPE, that he's like, my birth certificate is fraudulent. And I mean, well, all of ours are in a way, but yes, that let me know if you guys go through the process of that, because I think I'm going to have someone on in a few episodes talking about that, making the decision to change the birth certificate and your
Yeah,
legal name and the everything that goes along with it, the deeds, the bank accounts, the social security. It's
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
And your
and
children's name and your wife's
yeah,
name.
yeah.
Oh my
It
gosh.
affects so many people,
Mm.
and my wife keeps saying, she says, oh, the next time we get together with your, she's like, he's your dad.
Aw.
She doesn't worry
Mm-hmm.
about biological father or anything. She's just,
Yep.
next time we get together with dad, I'm gonna ask him. I'm gonna ask him if I can have his name. And she never does. She always chickens out.
Yeah.
But
I love how involved and supportive she has been this whole process.
she's Lily. She's been the best. She was actually really concerned about me too in the beginning, and she tried to get me a counselor to kind of help out. And I hear on your podcast all the time, these counselors don't really know how to deal with this situation, and
Mm-hmm.
he was more of a substance abuse counselor. And
Mm.
so the best thing he could come up with was, I think all this stuff with your new dad's going to work out just fine. But you drink a little bit too much, and I'm kind of concerned that your wife might leave you. And I was like, what? Well, this didn't go right. This is not helpful. you know, you might drink a little extra too if you went through this.
I've
Yeah.
noticed you call your I notice you call him David. How long have you been doing that?
Uh, it's um it's we kind of switched. I guess my wife has kind of always done that.
Okay.
She's always kind of put that disconnect in there.
Yep.
Just like I said, I mean, for years and years we've said, well, yeah, he's my dad, but probably not really. And that's just the way we talked about him. And so what when we found this out and we got confirmation, I actually immediately went in my phone and changed him from dad, his contact from dad to David.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to make that switch over because for me that's the way I want it to go.
Yeah.
We just never got along, and he's honestly, I mean, I could, it would be a whole nother podcast of abusive, parental relationships to talk about all the, just mean things and just how mean he's
Mm.
been and how much I just don't need him in my life. And so, I'm trying to make that switch over, but it's really awkward because, you don't, I don't want to, if I'm out visiting Scott in Seattle, it's like, I feel really awkward about just like yelling across the backyard, "Hey dad," it's like,
Hmm.
that's weird. We haven't done that yet. And I
Yeah.
don't know, I don't, I'm like the worst about procrastinating difficult situations. Um, that's kind of why it took me a couple months to even, tell David, the news. And even then, oh my gosh, once I sent him that text message that we have to talk, I felt like crying, vomiting, and just breaking down all in one. It was the worst feeling come over me. And it's just, but yeah, it's, I'm trying to make that switch, but at the same time, it's hard. How do these other people feel about it? And just trying to be sensitive to everybody's, how everybody feels about that kind of switch over. I think it's all, I honestly believe they're all fine with it and they would prefer it that way.
Hmm.
But it's, in my head, it's a big hurdle I would be going over to do that. So
Yeah, it's crazy to hear be at, I think you said you're 36, having to go through all of this. And do you call your dad dad? Do you say it out loud? When are you comfortable doing that? It's
yeah,
a lot.
yeah, a grown adult. I'm a grown man with a fully, successful life, and now I have to go through these childish kind
Mm,
of, these things that we're supposed to learn when we're kids, and
yeah.
now we're having to relearn it all. Gosh, it's quite the thing, Lily. And I gosh, that's why it's so great having your podcast and being able to hear other people go through it, and being able to process everybody's emotions and understanding that this is okay. This is
Yeah.
normal. This is normal to have these feelings. And, and this is a great space for us to be able to actually talk about our feelings. Cause some of this stuff, I don't even really talk with my wife about,
Mm-hmm.
some of this stuff in that kind of detail, just
I
because
know.
it's, especially as a male, and I've always been a very closed, reserved person. I've always kind of just been my own, done my own thing, and I think this experience has a lot to do with that. But
And I hope this space is also a place where sometimes for the people in our lives that aren't NPEs, you're like, I'm so consumed with this in my brain, but I don't want to talk your ear off about it. But I'm like, well, you can talk about it here as much as you
yeah,
want because we get
yeah,
it.
yeah, and you're right. It is all consuming. I mean, this is, I this is all I thought about for the last 10 months. I mean, it's every day. It's I kind of have a little bit of a longer drive to work because we live out in the country, and it's like, I'll just zone out, not even paying attention to what's on the radio, and you're just in your mind thinking like, oh my gosh, I have five
Hmm.
new sisters. And I would write down some of these things where it's like, all of a sudden I realize, like, I went from two siblings to, what, I have eight now, or and it's like, oh my gosh. And then I would sit there, and I was thinking about it, and I thought, oh my gosh, they all have full siblings. I don't have a full sibling. And then
Yeah.
it was like, I just start crying again. I'm
Yeah.
just crying in my car driving to work, thinking about that. And but it's funny because my youngest sister, she doesn't have a full sibling either, so she's like, we can be each other's full siblings.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
sweet.
she's so sweet. She just,
I love
yeah.
that she gave you a framed picture of herself. What a
Oh my
doll.
gosh, that was, yeah. That I'm telling you, I just broke down and started crying. It was
Mhm.
just the sweetest thing.
Now, if people want to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
They can absolutely email me, and I'd be willing to talk to anybody.
I will put that in the show notes. Do you want to go ahead and say it out loud if you remember it?
Yeah. So
Mm.
it's kind of funny to say it out loud, but it's spelled THETMAXX at yahoo.com.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for sharing all of this today. I've just loved your story. It's been, I identified with a lot of the draining, the challenging parts, but it was just so heartwarming to hear how you were accepted by your new family.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. And I think, I think that that kind of is the difference in my story from other people's. And is just it's been a great experience, but even the best experience is still it's just a wild ride.
Yeah, yeah, it is. These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.